All right, everybody. Dr. Imfan Akpan. I'm here. I want to react to a video that OpenAI just dropped on their YouTube. And this is really about value maxing. And I wanted to kind of react to it, talk about it, see what you think about value maxing with 5.6 in Codex.
Marketing team, and today I'm here with Charlie.
Hi, I'm Charlie from the Developer Experience team.
So today our topic is going to be about value maxing with GPT 5.6. So next slide. If this is your first time with us, the whole purpose of Build Hours is to empower you with the best practices, tools, and AI expertise to scale your company using OpenAI APIs and models. Down below is our homepage. So we're constantly posting new sessions as they come up. Feel free to check back, and you can also catch up on demand. We also post all of these sessions on YouTube on the day of, so check back later in case you want to review anything that we're chatting about today. So we've traditionally started every Build Hour with a meme, and we're back. So if we have any Office fans around, this is really about just getting more value per token. And Charlie's going to walk you through some tips and tricks on how to do this. So
I think this is in response to the fact that the cost to use tokens, I mean, it's gone up, especially, well, you know what, let me take that back. The cost to use the top models has gone up, and the length of time you can use the models. So remember, we've gone from just asking a question, getting an answer, to putting the models to work. So this uses a lot more tokens, a lot more spend.
This is our first Build Hour after GPT 5.6 release. So right after we released this model, we asked everyone, kind of why they love this model. And we were really just like humbled and also like taken away by all the reasons that people submitted. And I think a common theme that we saw was just how token efficient this model is, particularly, and just having you guys get the most bang per token. And recently, actually, I think this is 2 days ago on X, we reached a new milestone. So we're really happy to see that this is resonating with people, and that this new model is letting people do more with less tokens. So to give you a snapshot of what we're talking about today, the first is we're going to explain this shift that's gone from token maxing to value maxing. We're going to show you value maxing in Codex and then also value maxing your harness. And then I'm really excited that we will have Ploy, one of our favorite startups, join today to chat about how they've actually migrated their AI agent over. And last but not least is Q&A. So on the right side of your screen, if you toggle over to the Q&A button, you can actually submit questions, and our team will be in the room answering them on chat, and then also selecting a few to answer live.
One thing I wanted to mention is that we're moving from token maxing to value maxing. And we're seeing we're using as many tokens as possible, because right now the top intelligence, not the older models, the top intelligence, the best models are costing the most money to use, and to use over a longer period of time for agentic tasks. And one thing I want to keep in mind is today is as worse and as good as it will be for today. What do I mean by that? Right now, we've got 5.6. If you remember, it wasn't even 3 years ago, we had ChatGPT 4. And this is Codex, and everything we're using is really light years away from ChatGPT 4. And the cost, so when you think about it, things are developing. And if you think about next year, the 5.6 model will be a lot cheaper than ChatGPT 6.5, which we'll probably have. So if you're able to get by and to use the 5.5 or 5.5 is cheaper than 5.6. And if you're able to use that, why do you need to use the ChatGPT 6 or 6.5? So you can use, so I think what's going to happen is eventually really good intelligence will get cheaper as the models get better, but the best intelligence, the best models will cost the most. But the positive side is they'll cost the most until the next new model comes out. And then it's like cars. Once the new model comes out, the old model loses its value, right? It doesn't cost as much. So I think that's what we're looking at right now. So I think that's very interesting.
So feel free to ask any questions. And we're really excited to kick this off. So over to you, Charlie.
Thanks so much, Christine. Thanks everybody for joining. So excited to be here. I want to talk about value maxing, but I'm sure there's a lot of questions about what is that, right? And I think you can't quite explain what it is without first starting with token maxing. And I think token maxing is a term that emerged earlier in this year. And to kind of encapsulate it, right, it was essentially this idea of measuring progress by how much AI you're using. I think that might be how many tokens you're burning, how many prompts you're sending, how many agents you're managing at the same time. And I think we even saw companies that had stood up internal leaderboards to just track, how many tokens their employees were using day over day or week over week. Later on in the year, though, I think some of that sentiment started to change, right? We started to see, companies that were accidentally burning through their entire annual budget for AI in a handful of months, right? And we started to see a lot of enterprises start to pull back and say, well, maybe we should be throttling our AI spend, or even some AI CEOs saying that, some companies may have gotten carried away with their token leaderboards. And importantly, that we should be measuring employees on the outputs instead, right? And the value that they're generating. So that brings us to value maxing. In contrast with token maxing, it's measuring progress not by how much AI you're using, but what AI is actually helping you to accomplish, right? How much work are you getting done? How much time are you saving? How much, quality are you improving in the code and the artifacts that you're making? I think a question that I like to come back to when I think about, this framing of value is something like, if you doubled your token spend tomorrow, how would you know if it was worth it, right? There's perhaps a naive assumption of we spend more on tokens, it's going to be better. But, how does that work back to concrete outcomes? And I think there are a few questions that you can start to ask yourself as you're thinking through this for your own processes or your own company. Things like, what are the outcomes that you are trying to improve? With those outcomes, what are the workflows that lead to good quality outputs? Where in those workflows can you add intelligence? Can you add AI? Can you add tokens, right? And maybe accelerate or improve quality? And what evidence do you have that you are improving the quality, or that you are building a working system here, right? A lot of this, I think, when folks work with AI, you've probably heard the term evals, and I think a lot of AI research and engineering these days is driven by having good evals, which, to boil it down, to oversimplify it, basically means how do you define what good looks like? And I think as we move from just having to AI, having AI chatbots perform simple tasks, to having AI agents be responsible for entire outcomes, that question is still very valuable. What does good look like, and how do you define that and track that within your company?
I think one part that's missing from this is we've gone from the LLMs, from the chatbots, to agentic workflows. And a workflow, when you create the agent, you're designing it to do something, a process, autonomously, automatically, and many times repetitively, right? Where you don't have to be in the loop for that process. You're in the loop for the output, for checking the process. And I think it's good. Token maxing is good because when you think about it, it encourages you to use AI as much as possible. So you think through different use cases, you have the trial and error in building your workflows. And I think the piece he's leaving out is that agents, you have to tell that the codex, for example, is an employee. If you think of it as a digital employee and you've got to give it instructions on how to perform a certain task, so you're giving it a statement of work, you're telling it how to do this particular job, and you're describing it and you're putting it together and giving it the framework to do it. That is your workflow or your skill or building that agent. So I think this is the evidence of it is there by the fact that, number one, the AI can actually do the task and you get the output. Now, the question is, he mentioned quality of work. That's another portion. Is the work good? So is it doing this work? Is the work better than what I could have done? Or, do I have to do double the work to get it up to speed to move it forward? I think that's another question. So you have to kind of decide on what tasks the AI will meet the quality standards. But I think the workflows, the structure, all of that is there when we move to agentic AI systems.
Or your role. And I think I do want to say too that, in some cases it might seem like the answer here is, well, we should spend fewer tokens, right? Like we should downgrade our models or cut spend. And I'm sure in some cases that's absolutely true. I did also want to point out there might be some cases where you want to spend more tokens and that's actually still driving more value, right? You may decide, hey, we actually want to ensure that we have a high quality result. So we're going to bump the reasoning level on the model or switch to a bigger model. You might say, it's important that this gets done faster. So we are going to spend more on tokens now in order to save, real world wall clock time. That might be the case. Maybe you've got a big migration and you want to migrate something into a different programming language. Maybe you could do it, in a couple of months with fewer tokens, or maybe you can do it in a couple of weeks and spend some more. Similarly, if you know your workflows are working well and you want to scale them, then you can decide to spend more in order to just scale those outputs if they're working well. And last but not least, if you want to manage risk, you might have a system where it's really important that the output is high quality and and bulletproof. And in that case, you may want to do something like use LLMs as a judge, and you may want to use more or use a diverse range of them, right, in order to ensure that it's catching all sorts of different edge cases. Okay, so with that in mind, I want to talk about two ways of thinking about value maxing here. I think one is as an individual developer while you're using Codex. And I think another is as an organization or as a company that's building on top of OpenAI's APIs. We're going to start with Codex. Like Christine mentioned, I think the story of value maxing and Codex really starts with the GPT 5.6 family, right? If you're not familiar, we've got 3 new models in this family: Sol, Terra, and Luna. Sol is, our frontier model, our flagship model for the most complex coding and professional tasks. Terra is a really great daily driver, and I think it is, good for more balanced work where intelligence and cost or latency both matter. And Luna, we really like, and we've gotten a lot of positive feedback around it for high volume workloads where, the intelligence level is not as demanding, but you really do care about cost and latency. And I think we've put a lot of work, OpenAI has put a lot of work.
So you think about Sol, Terra, Luna, high, medium, low, so you think about the price point. One is high price point, low, medium. So when you think about the day-to-day, you want to use the lower cost. And if you think about it, the Luna is, you're getting hopefully more intelligence than 5.5. but on the lower end of the spectrum on 5.6. So that makes the value. So you're getting more, you can use it more, it's cheaper, but you're getting hopefully more intelligence than 5.5 if you're using 5.6 Luna.
Into making these models, especially 5.6, token efficient, right? If you kind of look at, this is DeepSuite, a benchmark, a popular coding benchmark that's out there. And if you take a look at, the performance on the benchmark relative to how many tokens you're spending, you can see that like the most bang for your token, as Christine mentioned, is coming from the 5.6 family. And it's a mix of different models at different reasoning levels. So I think as we've gotten better models and as we've gotten them to run for longer, one of the most important things to think about is not just how many tokens does it spit out, or even like what is necessarily the highest amount of intelligence that it has. I think we're finding that you can take a model that is maybe not as smart at one-shotting something, and if you're willing to spend more tokens on it, you can get similar performance. So I think as you evaluate some of this type of work, it's useful to take a look at not just cost per token, but cost per overall task.
Did you get what he was saying? So he was saying you can have a model that's not as good, but if you work with it, meaning you spend some more money on it, you can get it up to par. Or you use the more expensive model and you don't have to work with it so much. So there's an adjustment there.
To completion, right? And you can start to like fiddle with these and see how different things compare along different axes. Speaking of comparing along different axes, I want to jump into a demo to explore a little bit around these models and their reasoning levels to kind of get an idea of what we're doing. So this is a value maxing lab that I built with the help of GPT 5.6 and Codex. We're going to make sure this is open source after the build hour today, so everybody's going to have access to this code and you can run this yourself. Here, just on this first page, I had 5.6 build a three-dimensional chart comparing, a lot of the leading models in the Artificial Analysis Intelligence Index. And you can take a look at how they kind of compare along these different axes of intelligence, cost, and speed, right? And how long it actually takes to generate these outputs. But I think the more interesting thing here is this visual matrix, where if you supply an API key, like I've done here, I actually am going to render a number of SVGs along the different models and the different reasoning modes, so we can kind of see what the output looks like. So let's just say instead of a pelican riding a bicycle, I want a panda bear riding a jet ski. And I've selected all of them. Let's go ahead and run the matrix. It's going to work in the background. I think to start with, though, I do want to show everybody, I previously ran this with the pelican on a bicycle, and you can start to see, I think, the difference in sophistication as the models move up, right? And even if you take a single model, I think you can see the difference in sophistication along, if you just take Luna, for example. This first model is, I think, to be fair, is a little bit crude, right? But as you introduce more reasoning, the final result is actually pretty good, right? It looks like we're getting some results in here. But you can see, like, for example, Soul starts out pretty high fidelity. And then as it goes up, it just gets even more powerful, right? Obviously, you want your own benchmarks, you want your own evals to measure. And I think a great product will have this sort of thing coming in. But this is just a nice little demo to kind of out of the box take a look at what is it, like how does it compare across multiple different reasoning levels, right? And so we can see the run that I just started, right? It's coming in and already, even just on a few examples here, you can see there's like not much shading going on in this first one versus now we've added like green for the islands, bigger, like more detailed waves, shading on the sun and the clouds in the background, which I think is pretty cool just to be able to visually see everything that's going on here.
So I think in a sense, he's saying you've got to test your models to see how they work. You need to test the models to see how they work, create your own benchmarks, see how well they perform, and then decide how you would want to use them.
Cool. I think some more practical tips and tricks when it comes to using Codex and trying to get the most value out of it. We saw a little bit of the grid there in terms of how the reasoning levels differ, but my rule of thumb here is to start with Soul, and specifically start with Soul on medium. I think it's a really great model, and I do want to kind of dispel the notion here. I see a lot of developers who just assume I have to be on extra high for everything out of the box, right? And I think that is definitely true for sophisticated workloads, for complex projects that you're tackling, but a lot of day-to-day stuff is actually going to be really well served by 5.6 Soul on medium. I think if you're finding it's not quite as intelligent as you need, or it's not quite as thorough as you were hoping for, you can tune up. And in some cases, you might even decide to tune down and to swap to the light reasoning, or even to 5.6 Tera, if the work you're doing is not very coding, intensive. I think the second tip.
So this is letting you know you need to be in there adjusting the setting to high, medium, low. It'd be great if they had a router to do this, but it would be hard to figure out what you're working on. But you can decide on what level of intelligence you want and of token cost.
Here is to consider when you might want to trade tokens for time. I think there's a number of ways where you might just want something to go faster, and you might want to save your own time in exchange for more tokens. Fast mode is the obvious use case here. You can turn on fast mode to run your outputs at 1.5x speed, though it will consume your usage limits a bit faster. We highly recommend auto approval as the default mode for a number of reasons. I think we don't recommend using full access in Codex at this point. And I know personally, and from hearing from a lot of developers, requesting permissions on every single action is a little bit frustrating. So auto approval, I think, is a great sweet spot to have another model review the outputs and make sure that they're safe. And Chronicle is a relatively new feature in Codex. And if you turn that on, that will allow you to, I think, record your screen, and it basically develops memory for the task that you're doing. So as you start to do similar tasks over and over again, you can, you'll use more tokens to remember what's happening, but it'll get smarter about the type of work that you do every day. The third thing,
I think that is a great feature, because you can record what you're doing on the screen, and then it becomes a skill. And that's a lot more efficient than sort of telling it what to do. You can show it what to do. And then it can save that as a skill, because one person may approach something one way, and then the AI may try to approach it in a different way, and your way may be more efficient. So that saves on tokens as well.
Here is take a look at your agents MD and your skills. I think models have gotten very much more sophisticated, much more intelligent, and I think a lot of the things that we had in our agents MD and our skill instructions 6 or 12 months ago might be unnecessary now. I think when it comes to instruction following and persistence, we can go back and audit and say, hey, do we really need to be explicit about every single thing in here? Or is there a way to make this concise and save on our input tokens? So now I want to switch to talking about value maxing your harness, right?
So, you know what, and I'm going to end here. That was a good thing. He was saying that, and the way I took that is that the models have gotten a lot smarter, so we don't have to use as many input tokens. You don't have to prompt it as much, give it so much detail and things for it to read, for it to do specific tasks. So you can go back and kind of look through your skills and shorten them, or if you don't need them at all, you can get rid of them so that you're not using so many of your input tokens. So remember, you think about context window, input, output tokens. Your input also counts to your context window limit, or that size that you get to where things can begin to degrade. So that was very interesting. I want to hear what you think. What do you think about this value maxing? Is that something that we need to start looking into, or do we just keep token maxing? All right, thank you. Make sure, if you like this, make sure to like and subscribe.